Back so soon, Gomez?
No, it's getting chilly out there.
Do you remember those forgotten moments from classic TV shows of the 1960s? The ones that made us laugh, gasp, or hum along back when the whole family crowded around a single screen. From twitching noses to cliffhanger cards, these little details shaped television's golden age, but somehow slipped out of everyday memory. Let's bring them back and relive 100 forgotten things that made 60s TV unforgettable. Bewitched's twitching nose. Few 1960s TV moments are as instantly recognizable as Samantha Stevens wiggling her nose in Bewitched. With just a twitch, she could tidy the house, fix dinner, or turn Darren's day upside down. It was a simple camera trick, but to audiences, it felt like real magic unfolding in the living room. Kids tried and failed to copy the move in front of mirrors, while adults secretly wished chores could vanish with a wiggle. That tiny gesture became the show's signature, a symbol of whimsy and domestic fantasy. Decades later, the twitch still sparkles as one of TV's most charming spells. Gilligan's endless rescue attempts. On Gilligan's Island, hope always washed ashore, usually in the form of a radio message, a passing ship, or some makeshift contraption built from coconuts and bamboo. And every single time, Gilligan managed to ruin it. A tripped wire, a wrong button, a clumsy accident. It didn't matter how clever the professor was or how resourceful the skipper tried to be. The islanders' escape always slipped through their fingers, thanks to Gilligan's bumbling charm. Audiences knew the gag was coming, but that was the joy. The comforting cycle of rescue, failure, and laughter, all wrapped in sun-soaked tropical absurdity. The Addams Family's harpsichord theme. Nothing set the mood for the Addams Family quite like its iconic harpsichord theme, with those finger snaps punctuating every eerie little flourish. Premiering in the 1960s, the tune was instantly catchy, creepy yet playful, spooky yet inviting. Families across America couldn't resist snapping along in their living rooms, turning the macabre clan into beloved household names. The harpsichord's quirky sound matched the Addams' offbeat charm, bridging gothic style with sitcom humor. It wasn't just background music. It became part of the show's personality, a playful anthem for the strange and unusual. Even today, a couple snaps can summon the Addams magic. Uncle Fester's light bulb trick. On The Addams Family, Uncle Fester was a walking sight gag, but nothing topped his famous light bulb trick. With a mischievous grin, he'd pop a bulb into his mouth and, like dark magic, it would glow. No wires, no sockets, just pure Fester weirdness that delighted audiences in the 1960s. Kids tried to figure out how it worked, and thankfully didn't try it themselves, while parents chuckled at the sheer absurdity. The glowing bulb wasn't just a gag, it captured the Addams spirit. Bizarre, a little unsettling, but always funny. Fester turned electricity itself into a running joke with staying power. Green Acres' surreal farm humor. Green Acres wasn't just another country sitcom. It was a full-on exercise in absurdity. Debuting in the 1960s, it paired glamorous Eva Gabor with practical Eddie Albert on a farm where nothing ever made sense. Talking animals, winking locals, and running gags that bordered on cartoon logic turned every episode into a surreal comedy sketch. Unlike other down-home shows, Green Acres leaned into its strangeness, reveling in the clash between high society and hay bales. Viewers tuned in not for realism, but for the gleeful nonsense, where pigs had more personality than people, and every harvest came with a punchline. The Munsters' ghoulish suburbia. In the 1960s, the Munsters flipped the suburban sitcom on its head by plopping a family of lovable monsters into an ordinary neighborhood. Their spooky mansion at 1313 Mockingbird Lane, complete with creaky doors and cobwebs galore, stood out like a haunted house in a row of cookie-cutter homes. Herman, Lily, Grandpa, and Eddie looked terrifying, but acted like the most wholesome family on the block, except for Marilyn, their plain human relative. The humor came from the contrast, everyday situations seen through ghoulish eyes. It was eerie, campy, and surprisingly sweet, proving monsters could make suburbia feel oddly cozy. Petticoat Junction's water tower baths. One of the most unforgettable and slightly baffling images from Petticoat Junction was the Bradley sisters lounging in a train water tower as if it were a backyard pool. Introduced in the 1960s, this quirky setup became the show's signature opening, equal parts wholesome and cheeky. Audiences chuckled at the sight of three country girls splashing away in their unusual bathtub, while the family dog faithfully guarded their clothes. It was small-town innocence wrapped in a playful gimmick, and it stuck in pop culture far longer than most of the plots. That water tower bath remains Petticoat Junction's most charming oddity. My Mother the Car. Yes, really. Among the strangest TV experiments of the 1960s was My Mother the Car, a sitcom that asked audiences to accept, without irony, that a man's late mother had been reincarnated as a talking antique automobile. Yes, really. Starring Jerry Van Dyke, the show featured Mom's voice coming through the radio, offering advice, nagging, and moral lessons from the front seat. Critics panned it, audiences were baffled, and it quickly earned a reputation as one of television's oddest misfires. Still, its sheer weirdness makes it unforgettable, proof that the decade's TV landscape was daring enough to try just about anything, no matter how bizarre. Lost in Space's Danger, Will Robinson. Few catchphrases from the 1960s TV survived as strongly as the robot's frantic warning, "Danger, Will Robinson," on Lost in Space. Every time young Will wandered too close to trouble, alien traps, space storms, or Dr. Smith's latest scheme, the robot's arms flailed and the words rang out in mechanical urgency. The phrase became iconic, a mix of campy sci-fi melodrama and genuine excitement that kids repeated on playgrounds everywhere. Though the special effects were clunky and the costumes sometimes laughable, that warning gave the show its heartbeat. Even today, Danger, Will Robinson remains shorthand for impending trouble wrapped in nostalgia. Beverly Hillbillies Cement Pond. When the Clampetts struck oil and moved to Beverly Hills, their new mansion came with one luxury they couldn't quite name: the cement pond. To city folks, it was just a swimming pool, but to Jed, Granny, and the gang, it was an oddity worth marveling over. The running gag captured everything that made the Beverly Hillbillies so charming. Country innocence bumping up against high society absurdity. Kids watching in the 1960s laughed at the misunderstanding, while adults saw a sly wink at culture clashes of the era. The cement pond became more than a punchline. It was sitcom folklore. Hogan's heroes bumbling Nazis. Only the 1960s could have produced Hogan's Heroes, a sitcom set in a German POW camp where the Nazis were portrayed as laughably incompetent. Led by the clueless Colonel Klink and the blustering Sergeant Schultz, famous for his catchphrase, "I know nothing," the villains were more comic relief than menace. Meanwhile, Colonel Hogan and his resourceful crew ran elaborate spy missions right under their noses. Audiences tuned in for the absurdity, prisoners outsmarting their captors with ease, while the Nazis stumbled through slapstick blunders. It was risky, controversial, and undeniably strange, but somehow it became one of TV's unlikeliest hits. Mr. Ed, the Talking Horse. In the early 1960s, television audiences were treated to one of the strangest sitcom premises ever, a talking horse. Mr. Ed told the story of a wisecracking palomino who spoke only to his owner, Wilbur, dispensing sarcastic advice and causing endless misunderstandings. The horse's lips moved thanks to clever, if not entirely humane, tricks, but kids watching didn't care. It felt like magic. Each episode leaned on the absurdity of Wilbur trying to hide Ed's secret, while Ed outsmarted nearly everyone around him. Silly, surreal, and oddly endearing, Mr. Ed proved that sometimes the weirdest ideas stick the longest. The Andy Griffith Show's porch whistling. Few TV openings are as instantly soothing as the whistled theme of The Andy Griffith Show. Debuting in the 1960s, it set the tone before a word was spoken. Sheriff Andy and young Opie strolling with fishing poles. Small-town peace captured in a tune. That gentle porch whistling wasn't flashy. It was a promise of slower stories, homespun humor, and life lessons tucked into Mayberry's charm. Families across America knew the melody by heart, and it became shorthand for comfort and simplicity. Long before binge watching, that whistle was an invitation. Pull up a chair, the porch light is always on. I dream of Genie's bottle. In the 1960s, television magic came in the form of a pink and gold bottle that housed the mischievous Genie. With a puff of smoke and a playful blink, Barbara Eden appeared to grant wishes, or, more often, create chaos for her frazzled astronaut master, Major Nelson. The bottle itself became iconic, with its exotic curves and jewel-toned design, sparking plenty of toy replicas and Halloween costumes. Kids dreamed of finding their own Genie in a bottle, while adults chuckled at Genie's knack for turning simple problems into disasters. That shimmering bottle wasn't just a prop, it was a doorway into sitcom fantasy and 1960s escapist fun. Car 54, Where Are You? Chaos. In the early 1960s, Car 54, Where Are You? Delivered zany humor from inside a New York police cruiser. Officers Tootie and Muldoon bumbled through the Bronx, turning routine calls into slapstick chaos. Their well-meaning incompetence, peppered with fast-talking dialogue and over-the-top situations, made every episode a whirlwind of misunderstandings. The title itself became a running gag. Where was Car 54 anyway? While other cop shows focused on grit and drama, this one leaned into absurdity, showing law enforcement as a comedy of errors. It was loud, goofy, and unforgettable, a time capsule of TV embracing pure, chaotic fun. Dennis the Menace's slingshots. In the 1960s, Dennis the Menace brought Hank Ketchum's comic strip Rascal to life, and nothing symbolized his mischief more than the ever-present slingshot. Tucked into his back pocket, it was less a weapon and more a badge of boyhood trouble, a promise that chaos was never far behind. Dennis didn't need much, just his imagination and that trusty Y-shaped tool to torment poor Mr. Wilson or stir up neighborhood adventures. For kids watching, the slingshot was rebellion wrapped in innocence, a reminder of simpler playtime gadgets. It wasn't dangerous so much as iconic, a tiny prop that packed endless mischief. Family Affair's Mr. French. In the 1960s sitcom Family Affair, Mr. French stood out as the refined butler who held the entire household together, played with impeccable dignity by Sebastian Cabot. He balanced the chaos of raising orphan twins, Buffy and Jody, plus their big sister Sissy, under the care of bachelor Uncle Bill. With his crisp suits, polished manners, and occasional exasperated sighs, Mr. French became the show's quiet anchor, a blend of authority and tenderness. Audiences loved how he softened over time, proving that even the most proper gentleman could be drawn into the warmth of family. He was grace wrapped in heart. The Dick Van Dyke Show Ottoman Trip. Few sitcom openings are as iconic as Rob Petrie's living room entrance on The Dick Van Dyke Show. In the 1960s, viewers watched Dick Van Dyke stride confidently toward his family, only to trip spectacularly over the ottoman in one version of the intro. Other times, he'd sidestep it gracefully, a playful twist that kept audiences guessing. The gag perfectly summed up the show's blend of slapstick and sophistication, where comedy lived in both pratfalls and witty dialogue. That Ottoman trip wasn't just a stumble, it became television shorthand for charm, humility, and the joy of laughing at life's little missteps. That girl's mod outfits. On That Girl, Marlo Thomas didn't just play Anne Marie, she became a 1960s fashion icon. Each episode was a runway of mod outfits, bold colors, geometric prints, short skirts, and fabulous hats that captured the era's youthful energy. Anne's wardrobe reflected her independence as a single woman chasing an acting career in New York City, making her both relatable and aspirational. Viewers tuned in as much for the fashion as the storylines, with teenage girls copying her looks from department store racks. Those mod outfits weren't just costumes, they were statements of style, freedom, and the swinging spirit of the decade. Get Smart's shoe phone. In the 1960s spy spoof Get Smart, no gadget was more ridiculous or memorable than Maxwell Smart's shoe phone. Long before smartphones, Agent 86 would whip off his dress shoe mid-mission, flip open the sole, and start taking calls as if nothing were unusual. It was equal parts parody of Cold War spy tech and slapstick comedy, poking fun at the high-tech gizmos of James Bond. Audiences roared at the absurdity, and the shoe phone became a symbol of the show's clever mix of wit and silliness. It wasn't practical, but it was unforgettable, proof that comedy can outsmart logic. The Twilight Zone's eerie openings. Few shows in the 1960s announced themselves as memorably as The Twilight Zone. Each episode began with that haunting theme, those hypnotic notes pulling you into a world where nothing was quite right. Then came Rod Serling's voice, calm yet unsettling, inviting viewers to cross into a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. The swirling graphics, spinning doors, and floating eyeballs sealed the mood. Strange, uncanny, unforgettable. Before the story even started, audiences felt the chill of mystery. Those eerie openings weren't just intros, they were portals, promising that ordinary life could tip into the extraordinary. Outer Limits, We Control the Transmission. When the Outer Limits hit TV screens in the 1960s, it didn't just begin, it took over. The eerie voice intoned, "There is nothing wrong with your television set. We control the transmission," as the picture twisted and warped before your eyes. For kids at home, it was both thrilling and unsettling, as if the show really had hijacked the family TV. That bold opening blurred the line between fiction and reality, making viewers feel trapped inside the experiment. Long before streaming algorithms controlled what we watch, The Outer Limits declared itself the master of the airwaves, strange, chilling, and unforgettable. Star Trek's Tribbles. Among all the futuristic gadgets and intergalactic battles of Star Trek in the 1960s, nothing captured fans' hearts quite like the Tribbles. These small, furry, cooing creatures seemed harmless, until they multiplied faster than anyone could control. What began as a cute curiosity aboard the Enterprise quickly turned into an avalanche of fluff, spilling out of storage bins and driving Captain Kirk to exasperation. The episode, The Trouble with Tribbles, became an instant classic, balancing comedy with sci-fi in a way only Star Trek could. Tribbles proved that sometimes the galaxy's biggest problems come in the tiniest, fluffiest packages. Phasers set to stun. On Star Trek in the 1960s, the phaser was more than just a prop. It was a symbol of futuristic problem solving. With a quick adjustment, Captain Kirk or Mr. Spock could set it to stun, disabling an enemy without lasting harm. In a decade marked by Cold War tensions and escalating violence on the evening news, that little dial felt oddly hopeful, power paired with restraint. The special effects were simple. colored beams, and a dramatic sound effect. But the idea resonated. Phasers set to stun turned sci-fi tech into a moral statement, proving force didn't always have to mean destruction. Spock's Vulcan salute. Few gestures from the 1960s television are as instantly iconic as Spock's Vulcan salute in Star Trek, with fingers split into a V and accompanied by the phrase "live long and prosper." It became more than a sci-fi quirk, it was a philosophy. Leonard Nimoy, who played Spock, actually adapted the salute from a Jewish blessing he'd seen as a child, giving it real cultural roots. Fans everywhere tried, and often failed, to master the finger split, turning it into a badge of nerd pride. What began as a small character detail grew into a timeless symbol of peace and logic. Original Klingon looks. When Star Trek introduced the Klingons in the 1960s, they looked very different from the ridged forehead warriors fans know today. Budget and makeup limits meant these alien antagonists appeared more like swarthy space pirates, with darkened skin, goatees, and menacing eyebrows. Despite the simplicity, they embodied Cold War tensions, stand-ins for the Soviet threat, always clashing with the Federation. Viewers bought into the drama, even if the costumes felt a little cheap by modern standards. Those early Klingons may not have been elaborate, but they set the stage for decades of interstellar rivalry and became unforgettable TV history. Beam me up, Scotty. Well, close. In the 1960s, Star Trek introduced one of the most famous catchphrases in pop culture, except it never quite existed the way people remember it. Captain Kirk never actually said the exact words, "Beam me up, Scotty," though variations like "Scotty, beam us up" or "beam me up" were heard throughout the series. Still, the phrase stuck, perfectly capturing the fantasy of escaping trouble with a shimmer of light and a transporter hum. Fans repeated it everywhere, from playgrounds to office water coolers, and it became shorthand for wishing yourself anywhere else. Misquote or not, it's pure Star Trek legend. Lost in Space's robot arms. On Lost in Space, the robot was as much a star as the human cast, thanks in part to those wildly flailing accordion-style arms. Whenever danger approached, they swung dramatically, metal claws waving like frantic warning flags, as the robot shouted his famous alerts. Kids in the 1960s adored the over-the-top movements, which somehow made him both comical and heroic. The arms weren't just props, they gave the machine personality, turning cold metal into a lovable character. Whether he was protecting Will Robinson or scolding Dr. Smith, those jerky, waving arms made the robot unforgettable in sci-fi television history. Time tunnel swirling graphics. In the 1960s sci-fi series The Time Tunnel, the real star of the show might have been its dazzling opening sequence. Two scientists hurled through time appeared against hypnotic black and white spirals that seemed to pull viewers straight into the vortex with them. The swirling graphics were simple by today's CGI standards, but in their day, they were pure spectacle, part science fiction, part optical illusion. Every episode promised a new era of adventure, from ancient history to distant futures, all set up by that dizzying spiral. Those graphics weren't just an intro, they were an invitation to fall headfirst into time itself. Dark Shadows Gothic Soap Opera. When Dark Shadows premiered in the late 1960s, it began as a standard daytime soap, but soon morphed into something no one expected. A gothic saga filled with ghosts, curses, and, most famously, the vampire Barnabas Collins. Unlike sunny sitcoms of the era, this show embraced foggy mansions, thunderclaps, and brooding romance straight out of A Penny Dreadful. Viewers tuned in daily, caught between melodrama and the supernatural, and teenagers especially were hooked. The acting could be campy, the sets wobbly, but the atmosphere was irresistible. Dark shadows proved daytime TV didn't have to be ordinary. It could be deliciously spooky. The Invader's alien Pinky. In the late 1960s, sci-fi thriller The Invaders, the surest way to spot a disguised alien was deceptively small. Their pinky finger stuck out stiffly, never bending like a human's. It was a subtle but eerie detail that added to the show's paranoid atmosphere, where extraterrestrials lived among us, plotting in secret. Viewers leaned in, scanning characters for that telltale hand, fueling the tension of who's human, who's not. The pinky quirk might sound funny today, but at the time it was chilling. A low-budget yet clever trick that turned an ordinary gesture into a signal of lurking danger. UFO paranoia plots. In the 1960s, television leaned hard into America's fascination and fear of UFOs. With the space race in full swing and the Cold War fueling anxiety, countless shows served up storylines about mysterious lights in the sky, secret landings, and shadowy government cover-ups. The Outer Limits, The Invaders, and even anthology episodes of The Twilight Zone played on the question, what if they were already here? These plots blended sci-fi wonder with creeping dread, mirroring real headlines about sightings and conspiracies. To audiences, UFO stories weren't just entertainment. They felt like eerie possibilities, beamed straight into the living room. Saturday morning sci-fi serials. For kids in the 1960s, Saturday mornings weren't just for cartoons. They were also a launch pad into wild, low-budget science fiction. Shows like Fireball, XL5, Space Ghost, and Journey to the Center of the Earth filled the screen with rocket ships, ray guns, and heroes battling aliens of every shape and size. The effects were often clunky, the costumes a little laughable, but none of that mattered. With a bowl of cereal in hand, kids were transported to galaxies far beyond their neighborhoods. These serials were campy, colorful, and thrilling, a weekly passport to adventure fueled by imagination. Campy monster costumes. In the 1960s, TV monsters were more rubber suit than real terror. But that was half the fun. Whether it was The Outer Limits trotting out bug-eyed aliens, or Lost in Space, unleashing lumpy, foam-padded beasts, the costumes often looked like they'd been stitched together in a high school drama department. Zippers showed, rubber wrinkled, and fake fur shed under the studio lights. But kids watching at home didn't care. These creatures fueled playground nightmares and imaginations alike. Campy, awkward, and unforgettable, they became part of the era's charm, reminding us that sometimes the scariest monsters were also the silliest. Miniatures and model spaceships. In the 1960s, before CGI or green screens, outer space on TV was built from miniatures and model kits. Star Trek, Lost in Space, and The Time Tunnel all relied on carefully painted ships dangling from wires or gliding past starfield backdrops. Asteroids were spray-painted rocks, planets were glowing orbs, and explosions came from tiny pyrotechnics staged on tabletop sets. The effects were obvious, sometimes even wobbly, but they sparked awe in audiences who had never seen space travel so vividly imagined. Those little models carried big dreams, proving that even cardboard and fishing line could launch the imagination. Forbidden technology tropes. In the 1960s, sci-fi TV loved to warn viewers about the dangers of meddling with technology that humans weren't ready for. Episodes of The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, and Star Trek leaned on this trope. Scientists unlocking secrets of time travel, alien weapons, or artificial intelligence, only to suffer the consequences. Often, the story ended with a moral twist, reminding audiences that curiosity had limits and progress came at a price. These tales reflected Cold War anxieties about nuclear power and the space race. Forbidden technology plots weren't just entertainment. They were cautionary fables disguised as science fiction. Mind control plots. If one theme ran rampant across 1960s television sci-fi, it was mind control. The Outer Limits, Star Trek, and The Invaders all dabbled in stories where aliens, scientists, or shadowy forces bent human will with hypnotic stares, glowing gadgets, or mysterious brain implants. It was a trope that played directly into Cold War fears of propaganda, brainwashing, and loss of individuality. Heroes often fought back through sheer determination or a conveniently timed malfunction, but the idea stuck with viewers. Mind control plots weren't just creepy entertainment. They reflected real anxieties of the era, where control and freedom were in constant tension. Parallel universe episodes. In the 1960s, TV discovered the delicious thrill of the what-if scenario, and parallel universe episodes became instant fan favorites. Star Trek gave us the legendary Mirror Mirror world, where familiar characters turned ruthless, complete with Spock's unforgettable goatee. Anthology shows like The Twilight Zone also reveled in twisting reality, dropping ordinary people into alternate worlds that felt just close enough to ours to be unsettling. These episodes let writers explore morality, fate, and human nature without breaking the main storyline. For audiences, parallel universes were mind-bending adventures, proof that TV could stretch imagination into strange new dimensions. The Batman TV show's comic book sci-fi gadgets. The 1960s Batman series turned every episode into a campy tech showcase, rolling out gadgets that were equal parts absurd and ingenious. From the Batshark repellent spray to the Bat computer, every tool had a label and a dramatic reveal, often saving the day in the most over-the-top way possible. These gizmos poked fun at sci-fi tropes while embracing them, making Gotham feel like a comic book come to life. Kids begged for toy versions, while adults chuckled at the silliness. The gadgets weren't just props, they were punchlines, proof that even crime fighting could be colorful, ridiculous, and gloriously fun. Ray guns that looked like hairdryers. In the 1960s, sci-fi shows armed their heroes and villains with futuristic ray guns that, if we're being honest, often look suspiciously like repurposed hairdryers. Spray-painted silver, fitted with blinking bulbs or odd coils. These props were meant to scream high-tech, but they whispered backstage prop room instead. Still, audiences bought into the illusion, watching heroes zap aliens or villains, threaten Earth with weapons that hummed and glowed in low-budget glory. Kids even copied them at home with toys or household gadgets. Clunky or not, those ray guns became symbols of retro sci-fi charm, where imagination mattered more than realism. The dating game's cheesy questions. In the 1960s, the dating game turned matchmaking into prime-time comedy, complete with flower power sets and a parade of single hopefuls. Hidden behind a partition, the chooser grilled 3 contestants with questions that were supposed to be romantic, but usually landed in the land of corny. Lines like, "If you were an ice cream flavor, which one would you be and why?" drew laughs, groans, and plenty of awkward pauses. The charm wasn't in the answers. It was in the cheesiness, the playful winks, and the promise of a chaperoned prize date. Silly, colorful, and oh so 60s, it was irresistible fluff. The Newlywed Game's awkward confessions. Premiering in the 1960s, the Newlywed Game quickly became infamous for putting fresh marriages under the spotlight, with questions that were equal parts playful and mortifying. Contestants were asked about pet peeves, secret habits, and whoopee locations, leading to answers that sparked laughter, blushing, or the occasional argument. The fun was in the slip-ups. husbands forgetting tiny details, wives revealing a little too much, and the audience roaring at the chaos. It was lighthearted but risky, a mix of comedy and candid honesty. Awkward confessions made the show addictive, proof that love and embarrassment often went hand in hand. To tell the truth's dramatic reveals. In the 1960s game show To Tell the Truth, the setup was simple but irresistible. 3 contestants all claimed to be the same person with an unusual job or story, while a panel of celebrities tried to sniff out the truth. The fun came from the imposters' clever lies, the panel's wild guesses, and finally, the host's famous line, "Will the real so-and-so please stand up?" As the true contestant rose, gasps, cheers, and laughter filled the studio. Those dramatic reveals turned ordinary people into stars for a night, and the tension kept viewers glued until the very last second. Hollywood Squares snark. In the 1960s, Hollywood Squares took the classic quiz show format and gave it a celebrity twist, literally stacking stars in a giant tic-tac-toe board. The real draw wasn't the trivia, though. It was the razor-sharp one-liners from the likes of Paul Lynde, whose campy, quick wit became legendary. Questions were often silly, answers deliberately cheeky, and the banter between celebrities and contestants kept audiences laughing more than guessing. The game itself was almost secondary to the comedy, a setup for punchlines that sometimes pushed the envelope for the era. Snarky, playful, and endlessly quotable, it was sitcom energy disguised as a game show. Let's Make a Deal costumes. In the 1960s, Let's Make a Deal turned game show audiences into a carnival of costumes. Contestants showed up dressed as clowns, giant bananas, knights, brides, or anything outrageous enough to catch Monty Hall's attention. The zanier the outfit, the better your chances of being chosen to trade for cash or mystery prizes hidden behind glittering doors. Half the fun was the spectacle, seeing everyday people in wacky get-ups scream with joy or groan when they ended up with a goat instead of a car. It was chaotic, colorful, and unforgettable, making costumes as essential as the deals themselves. Concentration's memory boards. In the 1960s, Concentration challenged viewers' brains instead of their luck, with its signature giant board of numbered squares hiding matching pairs. Contestants flipped tiles 2 at a time, hoping to uncover prizes while slowly revealing a rebus puzzle beneath. The suspense came from memory skills colliding with luck. Was that vacation hiding under number 14 or number 22? Kids watching at home often shouted the answers before the adults caught on. The puzzles were cheesy, the prizes modest, but the format was addictive. Concentration proved that sometimes the simplest setup, cards, memory, and patience, could hook an entire TV audience. Password's whispered clues. On the 1960s game show Password, tension built not from flashing lights or wild stunts, but from a single whispered word. Celebrities and contestants leaned in close, trying to give just the right clue without breaking the strict one-word rule. The studio grew quiet, the audience held its breath, and then, boom, either a triumphant guess or a hilarious flop. Hosted with calm authority by Alan Ludden, the show turned vocabulary into high drama, with the whispered clues adding an almost conspiratorial intimacy. It was simple, elegant, and surprisingly gripping, proof that suspense didn't need bells and whistles to keep viewers hooked. American Bandstand's teen dancers. In the 1960s, American Bandstand wasn't just about the music, it was about the kids on the dance floor. Teens in sharp dresses, suits, and bouffant hairdos became trendsetters as millions watched them twist, jitterbug, and groove to the latest hits. Their styles influenced what kids wore to school on Monday, and their moves rippled across living rooms nationwide as viewers tried to copy them. Dick Clark kept things smooth and wholesome, but the real stars were those dancers, smiling, sweating, and radiating youth culture on live TV. They weren't professionals, just ordinary kids, and that authenticity made the magic work. Laugh-ins, sock it to me. In the late 1960s, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In exploded onto TV screens with rapid-fire jokes, groovy graphics, and catchphrases that stuck in pop culture. None was bigger than "sock it to me," a line shouted, sung, or squeaked before some zany slapstick gag inevitably landed. From water dumps to trapdoors, the phrase guaranteed chaos and laughter. Even Richard Nixon famously tried his hand at it, proving just how far the show's influence reached. Silly, unpredictable, and endlessly quotable, "Sock It to Me" embodied the show's spirit. Comedy as a colorful whirlwind where no one, not even a president, was safe. Captain Kangaroo's ping pong balls. For kids in the 1960s, Captain Kangaroo was a morning ritual filled with gentle humor, puppets, and the occasional burst of chaos, usually involving ping pong balls. Mr. Moose, with his sly grin, would lure the captain into answering a setup question, only for a shower of plastic balls to rain down from above. It was simple slapstick, but children howled with laughter every time, waiting for that magical moment of mess. The gag became so iconic, it practically defined the show's playful spirit. In an era of wholesome TV, those ping pong ball avalanches proved that silliness was timeless. Romper Room's magic mirror. In the 1960s, Romper Room gave preschoolers their very first taste of TV interactivity with the beloved magic mirror. At the end of each episode, the host would hold up a mirror frame, minus the glass, and peer through it as if she could actually see the children watching at home. Then came the moment every kid waited for. I see Bobby, I see Susan, I see Tommy. If your name was called, it felt like TV magic. If it wasn't, you begged for next time. The magic mirror turned a simple prop into childhood wonder, making kids feel truly seen. Mr. Rogers' early days. Long before he became a cultural icon, Fred Rogers was quietly shaping children's television in the 1960s with the early days of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. The sets were simple: cardboard castles, hand puppets, and a cozy living room. But the heart was already there. Rogers spoke directly to children with a calm kindness that stood out against the louder, flashier kids' shows of the time. He taught lessons about feelings, fairness, and curiosity, often with the help of King Friday the 13th or Daniel's Striped Tiger. Even in its modest beginnings, the show radiated warmth, laying the foundation for decades of gentle wisdom. Sherry Lewis and Lamb Chop. In the 1960s, puppeteer Sherry Lewis and her soft-spoken sidekick, Lamb Chop, charmed children across America. Lamb Chop, the little white sock puppet with a raspy voice and sassy wit, wasn't just cute, she was sharp, often playfully sparring with Sherry in ways kids adored and parents secretly appreciated. Alongside friends like Charlie Horse and Hush Puppy, the act blended music, gentle humor, and genuine warmth. Lamb Chop felt less like a puppet and more like a mischievous friend who lived inside the TV set. Simple, sweet, and a little cheeky, Sherry and Lamb Chop turned quiet mornings into cozy memories. Bozo the Clown's Pie Gags. In the 1960s, Bozo the Clown was a household name, and no episode felt complete without a classic pie-in-the-face gag. Kids tuned in to see Bozo's oversized shoes, wild red hair, and booming laugh. But it was the slapstick mess that always stole the show. Whether Bozo was the target or the trickster, those cream-filled pies splattered with glorious predictability, sending kids into fits of giggles. It was simple humor, straight out of vaudeville, but it worked perfectly for children's television. Bozo's pie gags reminded audiences that laughter didn't need sophistication, just a clown, a pie, and good timing. Hanna-Barbera's Saturday cartoons. In the 1960s, Saturday mornings belonged to Hanna-Barbera, from the Flintstones and the Jetsons to Scooby-Doo and Johnny Quest. Their colorful, limited animation style filled living rooms with laughter and adventure. The characters were funny, a little wacky, and endlessly quotable, designed to hook kids before they even finished their cereal. Parents loved the quiet time, while children got swept into worlds of talking animals, futuristic gadgets, and mystery-solving teens. The animation might have been budget-conscious, but it didn't matter. These shows became cultural touchstones. Hanna-Barbera proved that a few lines and bright colors could launch entire Saturday traditions. The Banana Splits theme song. In the late 1960s, the Banana Splits Adventure Hour burst onto screens with costumed animal characters, zany sketches, and a theme song so catchy it lodged in your head for days. Tra-la-la, la-la-la-la was sung endlessly by kids skipping rope, riding bikes, or just waiting for the show to start. The tune was silly, upbeat, and impossible to resist, exactly the kind of earworm that defined childhood. While the show itself mixed cartoons with live-action slapstick, it was the theme song that truly stuck. Even decades later, one tra-la-la can bring the nostalgia rushing back. Gumby's claymation. In the 1960s, Gumby stood out with its stop-motion claymation style, a world where a green, blocky little figure and his trusty pony, Pokey, could bend, stretch, and leap into books for adventures. The animation was quirky, sometimes jerky, but its handmade charm gave it a magic all its own. Kids were mesmerized as Gumby slipped between pages into whole new worlds, facing off against the mischievous blockheads. Unlike slick cartoons, Gumby felt personal, almost like toys coming to life right in front of you. It was simple, surreal, and endlessly imaginative, a clay dreamscape that made Saturday mornings unforgettable. H.R. Pufnstuf's wild costumes. When H.R. Pufnstuff hit TV screens in 1969, it looked like nothing else kids had ever seen. The show was a psychedelic parade of oversized Technicolor costumes. Mayor Pufnstuff himself was a towering dragon in a sash, joined by talking mushrooms, kooky critters, and the witchy Wilhelmina W. Witchypoo. The sets were bright, the characters larger than life, and the whole production felt like a Saturday morning fever dream. Kids were dazzled, parents were baffled, and everyone remembered it. The wild costumes weren't just decoration, they were the show's identity, turning every episode into a bizarre, unforgettable trip through imagination. Underdog's rhymes. In the 1960s, kids cheered for Underdog, the humble shoeshine boy who transformed into a caped canine hero. What made him stand out, besides his pill-powered strength, were the rhyming couplets he spoke while saving the day. Lines like, "There's no need to fear, Underdog is here," gave the show a sing-song charm that stuck in young viewers' heads long after the episode ended. His rhymes made him sound both noble and playful, turning every rescue into a mini-poem. Simple, catchy, and heroic, Underdog's rhyming style made him more than a cartoon. He was Saturday morning's pint-sized bard. Rocky and Bullwinkle's puns. In the 1960s, the adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle proved that cartoons could be clever as well as silly, thanks to its endless supply of puns. Every episode was laced with wordplay, corny, groan-worthy, and brilliant all at once. The Moose and Squirrel bantered while announcers delivered wink-at-the-audience lines, often with pun-filled fractured fairy tales, or Peabody's improbable history segments in between. Kids laughed at the slapstick, while adults caught the sly jokes tucked into the dialogue. The puns became the show's signature rhythm, proving that humor didn't need fancy animation, just sharp writing and a willingness to be delightfully ridiculous. Casper the Friendly Ghost. In the 1960s, Casper the Friendly Ghost floated through Saturday mornings with a gentleness that set him apart from other cartoon characters. Unlike the spooky spirits of horror films, Casper only wanted friends, which made his endless rejections both funny and a little bittersweet. Kids related to his loneliness, even as they laughed at the slapstick scrapes he fell into. His soft voice, round features, and unwavering kindness made him one of the era's most endearing characters. Simple in design but rich in heart, Casper proved that even a ghost could become a symbol of innocence, hope, and childlike charm. Jonny Quest's Pulp Adventure. In the 1960s, Jonny Quest brought pulp-style adventure to Saturday morning TV, blending sci-fi, action, and exotic mystery into a cartoon unlike anything else on the air. Johnny, his scientist father, their bodyguard Race Bannon, and friend Haji faced danger in jungles, deserts, and far-off islands, battling spies, robots, and creatures pulled straight from comic book fantasies. The show's bold animation style and dramatic tone felt more adult than most kids' cartoons, giving it a thrilling edge. Packed with jetpacks, laser guns, and high-stakes plots, Jonny Quest captured the spirit of adventure stories and made kids dream of globe-trotting heroics. Speed Racer's dubbing quirks. When Speed Racer sped onto American TV in the 1960s, kids were instantly hooked by fast cars, wild villains, and that unforgettable theme song. But what really stood out, sometimes unintentionally, were the quirks of its English dubbing. Characters spoke at lightning speed to match the original Japanese animation, cramming lines into rapid bursts that often sounded hilariously frantic. Lips kept moving long after sentences ended, or voices overlapped in chaotic rhythm, giving the show a manic energy all its own. Instead of breaking the magic, the dubbing became part of its charm, making Speed Racer feel as unique as the Mach 5 itself. Pink Panther shorts. In the 1960s, the suave and silent Pink Panther strolled from the big screen into TV shorts, bringing cool jazz and slapstick comedy to Saturday mornings, with Henry Mancini's smooth theme music purring in the background. The Pink Panther outwitted bumbling foes through clever sight gags rather than dialogue. The humor was stylish, almost sophisticated, relying on timing and expression instead of chatter. Kids laughed at the pratfalls, while adults admired the sleek design and jazzy vibe. Minimalist yet memorable, the Pink Panther shorts proved that sometimes the quietest character on screen could steal the loudest laughs. Walter Cronkite's steady voice. In the 1960s, no voice carried more weight in American living rooms than Walter Cronkite's. As anchor of the CBS Evening News, he delivered headlines with a calm, reassuring authority that made viewers feel they could trust every word. Whether he was reporting on the moon landing, the Vietnam War, or national tragedies, his steady cadence brought clarity to chaotic times. Families gathered around the TV, dinner plates still warm, to hear the most trusted man in America explain the world. Cronkite's voice wasn't flashy, it was dependable, grounding an era of upheaval with a sense of quiet certainty. Color TV coverage of the moon landing. In July 1969, millions of Americans huddled around their televisions to witness humanity's giant leap onto the moon. While the actual footage from NASA came through in black and white, networks wrapped the event in full color, anchors in vibrant studios, graphics in dazzling hues, and commercials reminding viewers that the future of TV was here. For families who had only recently upgraded from black and white sets, it felt like stepping into the space age twice over. The moon landing wasn't just history, it was a showcase for television itself, proving that color could make even earthbound living rooms feel part of the cosmos. Civil rights protests on the evening news. In the 1960s, the evening news brought the civil rights movement straight into American homes, often in stark and unflinching images. Viewers saw marchers in Selma, sit-ins at lunch counters, and clashes between peaceful protesters and police wielding fire hoses or dogs. For many families, these broadcasts were their first direct glimpse of the struggle for equality, making the fight impossible to ignore. Anchors narrated with grave seriousness, and living rooms became spaces of debate, reflection, and, for some, awakening. Television didn't just report history, it forced a nation to confront it, one broadcast at a time. Assassination reports that froze households. In the 1960s, television carried breaking news with a gravity that stopped families in their tracks, none more so than the reports of assassinations. When President John F. Kennedy was shot in 1963, programs were interrupted, anchors' voices shook, and households fell silent as the nation watched in disbelief. Similar moments followed with Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy. Tragedies replayed in stark black and white images. These broadcasts weren't just news, they were national shocks unfolding in real time, shared by millions of viewers at once. Television turned private grief into a collective pause, freezing entire households in sorrow. Vietnam War footage at dinner time. In the 1960s, the Vietnam War wasn't just a distant conflict. It unfolded nightly in American living rooms, often right as families sat down for dinner. Grainy footage showed jungle firefights, wounded soldiers, and protests back home, narrated by sober-voiced anchors. Unlike past wars, this one felt immediate, raw, and unavoidable, reshaping public opinion as the images grew harder to reconcile with official optimism. Kids asked questions, parents grew uneasy, and the clatter of forks sometimes fell into silence. The war became known as the living room war for good reason. TV made it feel like part of the family table. Huntley-Brinkley sign-off. In the 1960s, NBC's nightly news ended with a ritual as familiar as a family goodnight. Chet Huntley in New York and David Brinkley in Washington trading their signature farewell. Huntley would conclude his segment, then Brinkley would add his closing thoughts, and together they'd sign off with the simple, steady phrase, "Good night, Chet. Good night, David. And good night for NBC News." It was calm, professional, and oddly comforting, a reassuring bookend to often turbulent headlines. That sign-off became iconic, proof that even in political conventions televised in full. In the 1960s, political conventions weren't just highlights on the evening news. They were marathon television events broadcast wall to wall. Networks aired the speeches, the delegate roll calls, the balloon drops, and even the endless procedural squabbles, giving Americans a front row seat to democracy's messy theater. Families tuned in like it was a sporting event, cheering their candidates or groaning through the delays. The 1968 Democratic National Convention, with its protests and clashes outside the hall, made headlines as much for what viewers saw on TV as what happened inside. These broadcasts turned politics into shared living room drama. Kennedy-Nixon debates replayed. The 1960 Kennedy-Nixon debates became the first true TV political spectacle, and throughout the decade they were replayed, studied, and remembered as a turning point in American media. Viewers saw more than policies. They saw posture, expressions, and charisma. Kennedy appeared polished and confident, while Nixon, pale and sweating under the hot lights, seemed uneasy. Radio listeners thought Nixon held his own, but television audiences overwhelmingly favored Kennedy, proving the medium's power. As reruns and news clips reminded Americans, this was the moment when image began to matter as much as words. The debates redefined politics for the TV age. Evening weather maps with chalkboards. In the 1960s, before sleek graphics and Doppler radar, the nightly weather forecast often meant a chalkboard, a weatherman in a suit, and a handful of hand-drawn symbols. Suns, clouds, and swirling storm lines were sketched in real time, sometimes smudged as the forecaster brushed against the board. Viewers didn't mind. It felt personal, like a neighbor explaining the weather rather than a machine. Kids giggled at the doodles, parents nodded along, and everyone trusted the forecast, even if it wasn't perfect. Those chalkboard maps were simple, charming, and human, long before green screens made meteorology feel like science fiction. Test patterns with Indian head graphics. In the 1960s, television didn't run 24/7, and when stations signed off for the night, or before programming began, screens filled with test patterns. The most famous was the Indian head graphic, a Native American profile surrounded by concentric circles, grids, and calibration lines. Families adjusting rabbit ears used it to fine-tune reception, while kids stared at it impatiently, waiting for cartoons or shows to return. The high-pitched tone that often accompanied it became part of the memory too. Simple, strange, and oddly hypnotic, the Indian head test pattern symbolized TV's off hours, an era when silence and static still had their place. Please stand by. Technical errors. In the 1960s, when something went wrong on live television, and it often did, viewers were greeted by a static screen stamped with the words, "Please stand by." Sometimes it meant the feed had gone down. Other times, a reel jammed or a studio light blew. Families at home sat staring, half frustrated, half amused, waiting for the picture to return while kids fiddled with the rabbit ears just in case it was their set's fault. Unlike today's seamless broadcasts, those interruptions were part of the charm, little reminders that TV was still a fragile, human-run machine. Glitches became their own kind of nostalgia. Local news anchors with regional quirks. In the 1960s, before national news personalities fully dominated the screen, local anchors carried a kind of hometown celebrity status. Every city had its own trusted face delivering the day's headlines, often with distinct accents, mannerisms, or folksy humor that reflected the region. Some drew maps by hand, others slipped in corny jokes, and a few became legends just by being steady, familiar presences night after night. Families felt like they knew their anchors personally, as if they were neighbors dropping by to chat about the day. Those regional quirks gave TV news its warmth and its roots. TV specials on Cold War drills. In the 1960s, the shadow of the Cold War found its way onto television not just through news, but through instructional specials and civil defense broadcasts. Families were shown how to duck and cover, stock fallout shelters, and prepare emergency kits, all delivered in calm, authoritative tones meant to soothe even as they unsettled. Teachers wheeled TVs into classrooms for similar broadcasts, where kids watched cartoon turtles demonstrating survival techniques that seemed both absurd and terrifying. These specials were part education, part propaganda, reflecting the era's anxious balance between optimism and fear. Television made nuclear drills feel like routine homework. Public service announcements. In the 1960s, public service announcements slipped into TV breaks with a mix of seriousness and charm. They urged kids to brush their teeth, buckle up, or stay away from strangers, often delivered by friendly mascots or calm-voiced narrators. Smokey Bear reminded everyone that only you can prevent forest fires, while animated jingles drilled simple lessons into memory. Some were somber, warning of real dangers, while others leaned on cheerful rhymes to make safety stick. They weren't flashy, but they were part of daily viewing, small reminders that television wasn't just for entertainment, it was also there to look out for you. Commercial jingles burned into memory. In the 1960s, television commercials didn't just sell products. They sold songs that lodged themselves in your brain for decades. Catchy jingles hawked everything from breakfast cereal to laundry detergent, often more memorable than the shows they interrupted. Kids sang along to candy ads on the playground, while parents hummed coffee slogans in the kitchen without realizing it. The tunes were simple, repetitive, and relentlessly cheerful, designed to be impossible to forget. Long after the products faded from shelves, the jingles lived on in memory, proof that television's real magic wasn't just storytelling, it was turning advertising into earworms. Batman's POW graphics. When Batman hit TV screens in the 1960s, its fight scenes became legendary thanks to those comic book-style graphics, POW, B-A-M, zap, that exploded across the screen. Brightly colored and ridiculously over the top, they turned every punch into a pop art spectacle, straight out of the comic panels. Kids cheered, parents chuckled, and the campy style made the show feel like a live-action cartoon. The graphics weren't just decoration, they were part of the joke, winking at the audience while the caped crusader and Boy Wonder clobbered Gotham's goofiest villains. Simple, silly, and iconic, those POWs made TV fights unforgettable. Campy laugh tracks. In the 1960s, television comedy often came with an invisible audience, the laugh track. Whether it was a subtle chuckle or a booming roar, canned laughter told viewers exactly when something was funny, whether or not it actually was. Shows like Gilligan's Island or I Dream of Jeannie leaned on it heavily, creating an odd rhythm where jokes landed to pre-recorded giggles. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it felt hilariously forced, but it became part of sitcom DNA. Looking back, those laugh tracks feel campy, even awkward, yet they're inseparable from the charm of classic TV's goofy, anything-goes humor. Theme songs sung by casts. In the 1960s, TV theme songs weren't just catchy tunes. They often doubled as introductions sung by the cast themselves. From the Beverly Hillbillies strumming out their backstory in a folksy ballad to Gilligan's Island, cheerfully laying out its premise in rhyme, the music set the tone before a single scene rolled. Viewers could sing along word for word, turning opening credits into little communal rituals. These themes were part commercial, part storytelling, and part campfire song, making characters feel like old friends before the episode even began. Cast-sung intros gave the show personality and left audiences humming long after the credits ended. Cliffhanger to be continued cards. In the 1960s, nothing cranked up TV suspense quite like the ominous to be continued card flashing across the screen. Just when heroes were trapped, villains triumphant, or mysteries unsolved, the episode would be cut off, forcing viewers to wait an entire week for answers. Kids groaned, parents sighed, but everyone tuned in next time, eager for the resolution. Shows like Batman leaned on this trick. ending mid-peril with campy narrations urging viewers to tune in tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel. Those cliffhangers weren't just plot devices, they were hooks, proof that anticipation was half the fun of watching TV. Sponsor plugs mid-show. In the 1960s, it wasn't unusual for a show to pause mid-episode, so the stars themselves could pitch a sponsor's product. Viewers might see Lucy and Ricky holding up a box of cigarettes, or a sitcom dad casually praising laundry detergent before the story resumed. These plugs were woven right into the fabric of the program, blurring the line between entertainment and advertising. It felt friendly, almost neighborly, like the characters were letting you in on a secret. Campy by today's standards, those sponsor cameos were a reminder that TV was still figuring itself out, selling laughs and soap in the same breath. Cigarette ads on primetime TV. In the 1960s, cigarette commercials puffed their way across primetime television, treating smoking less like a health risk and more like a glamorous lifestyle. Smooth-voiced narrators promised sophistication, rugged cowboys lit up on horseback, and jingles made smoking sound downright cheerful. These ads were everywhere, between sitcoms, dramas, and even family shows. So much so that they became part of the cultural wallpaper. Kids hummed the jingles, adults repeated the slogans, and no one batted an eye. It wasn't until the very end of the decade that the tide began to turn. Until then, smoking on TV was as normal as popcorn. Canned laughter that never matched the joke. In the 1960s, sitcoms often leaned on canned laughter to fill the gaps, but sometimes the timing was hilariously off. A character might deliver a line that wasn't even meant to be funny, and suddenly the speakers erupted in roaring chuckles. Other times, a genuinely clever gag got only a polite sprinkle of giggles. Viewers at home didn't always question it, they just rolled with the rhythm. But looking back, the mismatch feels almost surreal. The laugh track wasn't just background noise, it shaped how shows were experienced, even when the laughter came at the wrong time and for the wrong reason. Black and white holdovers in the color era. By the mid-1960s, color TV was the shiny new standard, but not every show or every household made the leap right away. Some series like The Andy Griffith Show and Bewitched began in black and white before transitioning, while others never bothered, sticking with grayscale charm. Families with color sets sometimes groaned when their favorite programs still aired in black and white, while those with older TVs barely noticed. The holdovers felt quaint, even nostalgic, against the growing wave of vibrant sitcoms and sci-fi spectacles. They were reminders that TV was still evolving, straddling two worlds, one in muted tones, the other bursting into color. Goofy commercial mascots. In the 1960s, TV breaks were packed with mascots so goofy they were impossible to forget. From the jolly Pillsbury Doughboy giggling when poked to Tony the Tiger booming, "They're great!" at breakfast tables, advertisers knew silly characters sold products. Some mascots were animated, others costumed actors with oversized heads, all designed to catch kids' attention before Saturday cartoons or family sitcoms resumed. They danced, sang, and cracked jokes that often outshined the commercials themselves. Corny as they were, these mascots became cultural icons, proof that even the strangest characters could burrow into memory and shopping carts. Evening sign-offs with national anthems. In the 1960s, television didn't run all night. When the final program ended, stations often closed the broadcast day with a patriotic flourish, the national anthem. Families watched as images of flags waving, soldiers saluting, or scenic American landscapes rolled across the screen while the Star-Spangled Banner played. Then came the test pattern, or a blank hum of static, signaling it was time for bed. For many viewers, that sign-off felt ceremonial, a nightly reminder of both routine and patriotism. Unlike today's endless streaming, TV back then had an official bedtime, marked by music that echoed in living rooms nationwide. On screen, please adjust your set. In the 1960s, before streaming glitches and software updates, TV malfunctions came with a simple message: please adjust your set. When the picture rolled, flickered, or vanished into static, the fault wasn't always at the station. It might be your rabbit ears or fine-tuning dial. Viewers would jiggle antennas, smack the side of the set, or twist knobs in frustration, hoping the image snapped back. The phrase became both instruction and inside joke, a reminder that television was still a fragile miracle. Those on-screen notes weren't just technical, they were part of the era's charm, proof you were wrestling with living technology. Westerns galore: Bonanza, Gunsmoke, The Big Valley. In the 1960s, the TV landscape was dominated by the Wild West. Night after night, families gathered to watch sprawling sagas like Bonanza, Gunsmoke, and The Big Valley, where dusty towns, shootouts, and moral dilemmas played out against painted desert backdrops. These shows mixed action with lessons about honor, justice, and family, giving audiences a mix of grit and comfort. While plots could be formulaic, sheriffs versus outlaws, ranchers versus rustlers, they carried an irresistible appeal. For a decade defined by change, Westerns offered a simpler fantasy, a world where problems could be solved with courage, grit, and the occasional showdown. Cowboy sidekicks. In the 1960s flood of TV Westerns, the cowboy sidekick was a staple, loyal, quirky, and often the heart of the show. While the stoic hero handled gunfights and moral lessons, the sidekick cracked jokes, provided comic relief, or offered homespun wisdom around the campfire. From Festus on Gunsmoke with his drawl and scruffy charm to Hoss Cartwright on Bonanza with his big-hearted humor, these characters grounded the stories in humanity. They reminded viewers that the frontier wasn't just grit and gunsmoke, it was friendship, laughter, and loyalty. The cowboy sidekick made the Wild West feel a little warmer. Stage-bound fight scenes. In the 1960s, TV fight scenes were often less about realism and more about choreography squeezed onto small studio sets. Westerns, spy shows, and cop dramas alike staged brawls where punches missed by inches but landed with dramatic sound effects, and villains toppled over furniture in perfect slow-motion chaos. Audiences didn't mind the obvious fakery. It was part of the fun. Heroes always dusted themselves off without a scratch, while henchmen went flying after a single jab. These stage-bound scraps weren't gritty or brutal. They were theater, turning living rooms into arenas of campy, harmless action. Cheesy cliffhangers. In the 1960s, TV loved to keep audiences hooked with cliffhangers that were as campy as they were suspenseful. Heroes dangled from cliffs on painfully obvious soundstage rocks. Villains cackled over ticking bombs, and detectives opened doors to ominous shadows just before the screen went black. The tension wasn't always convincing, but it didn't need to be. What mattered was making sure viewers came back next week. Shows like Batman leaned all the way into the cheese, narrators booming about dire peril with a wink. These cliffhangers weren't high art, but they were irresistible, bite-sized jolts of serialized fun. Actors doing product endorsements. In character. In the 1960s, the line between show and commercial often blurred when actors slipped into sponsor mode without ever leaving their roles. Viewers might see the cast of Bewitched pausing to praise a coffee brand, or a cowboy from a western tipping his hat to recommend cigarettes or soap flakes. It was jarring and hilarious, as if your favorite characters suddenly cared deeply about your grocery list. To audiences, it felt natural. TV stars were trusted voices, even when selling detergent. Today it might seem absurd, but back then, in-character endorsements made advertising feel like part of the story itself. Long summer reruns. In the 1960s, summer TV meant one thing: reruns. With no new episodes rolling out between seasons, families rewatched their favorite shows, from Bewitched to Bonanza, sometimes memorizing lines before September arrived. Kids didn't complain. They were happy to catch missed episodes or relive beloved ones, even if the storylines felt familiar. Networks counted on it too, using reruns to keep audiences hooked without the expense of fresh content. Unlike today's endless new drops, summer was a slower rhythm, filled with repeats that felt like old friends. Reruns turned hot, lazy nights into small trips back through familiar stories. Shaky special effects. In the 1960s, television special effects were ambitious, but often hilariously shaky, literally. Spaceships dangled from visible wires, monsters wobbled in rubber suits, and earthquakes were created by shaking the camera while actors staggered dramatically across the set. Audiences knew it wasn't real, but they happily played along because the charm was in the effort, not the polish. Shows like Lost in Space and The Outer Limits made up for their budget limitations with creativity, turning cardboard sets and smoke machines into alien worlds. Shaky or not, those effects fueled imaginations and proved that wonder didn't need perfection to land. That shared family ritual of circling shows in the TV guide. In the 1960s, before DVRs and streaming queues, the TV guide was the weekly roadmap to entertainment. Families eagerly flipped through its pages, pens in hand, circling the shows they couldn't miss. Whether it was the Beverly Hillbillies, The Twilight Zone, or the big Sunday movie, kids fought over who got to mark their picks, while parents strategized around news broadcasts or primetime favorites. Those little ink circles turned a flimsy booklet into a household planner, filled with excitement and anticipation. It wasn't just about watching TV, it was about the ritual of choosing, together, what the week's stories would be. And there you have it, 100 forgotten gems from the golden age of 1960s television. From twitching noses to shaky spaceships, these little details remind us how TV shaped not just entertainment, but everyday life. Which of these classics do you remember best? Share your favorites in the comments. Hit like if this brought back memories, and don't forget to subscribe for more nostalgic deep dives.